Imagine being screamed at by your boss, only to find out the quiet customer in the corner was actually the owner. It had been one of those long days where everything felt like a test. Meetings that ran over, calls that led nowhere, and the never-ending pressure of keeping a business running smoothly. But Malcolm Reed was used to it. At 50, he had built everything from the ground up. No handouts, no shortcuts. Just grit, patience, and an understanding that the world didn't always play fair. That's why Reed's comfort kitchen meant more to him than just a diner. It was proof that hard work paid off. But Malcolm wasn't the kind of owner who needed people to know his name. That's why, on most nights, he didn't walk in through the back door like a boss. He walked in through the front like any other customer. No suit, no introductions, just jeans, a hoodie, and a quiet presence in the corner booth. Tonight was no different. The place had its usual rhythm, orders being called out, plates clattering, conversations blending together in a steady hum. A mix of regulars and newcomers filled the seats, all drawn by the same thing. Good food that felt like home. Malcolm slid into his usual booth near the back, the one with the slightly wobbly table leg he never got around to fixing. He didn't need a menu. He ordered the same thing every time: fried catfish, collard greens, cornbread, and a tall glass of sweet tea. As he waited, he watched. Most nights, that's all he did. Watch how the servers moved, how the cooks handled the rush, how customers reacted to their meals. He learned more that way than he ever could from reports or feedback forms. It told him whether his business was still living up to the promise he made when he first opened the doors. But something felt different tonight. His eyes drifted toward the kitchen entrance. A waitress hurried through, balancing a tray, her shoulders tense. He recognized her, had only been working there a few weeks. Young, quiet, always polite. But she wasn't moving with the same energy as usual. Her steps were rushed, almost shaky, and then he heard it, soft, barely noticeable over the clatter of dishes, a muffled sob coming from the kitchen. But Malcolm knew one thing for sure. People don't cry in the kitchen for no reason. Malcolm kept his eyes on the kitchen doors, his fingers resting lightly against the rim of his glass. He wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but something didn't sit right with him. The waitress, her name was Danielle, if he remembered correctly, had been steady and professional since she started. A little quiet, maybe, but good at her job. If she was in the back, crying, something was wrong. Then came the voice. Harsh, sharp, cutting through the usual clatter of the kitchen. "You think I got time for this, Danielle? Customers are waiting. You want to cry? Do it on your own time." Malcolm leaned back slightly, watching through the small window on the swinging kitchen door. The shift manager, Keith. Mid-40s, been around longer than most. The kind of guy who did his job well enough, but had a habit of talking down to people when he thought no one important was listening. Danielle had her back against the counter, hands gripping the edges like they were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Her head was low, shoulders shaking. I just needed a minute," she whispered. "Yeah? Well, you don't have a minute. Table 4's still waiting for refills, and I got 2 plates getting cold. Maybe if you focused on working instead of feeling sorry for yourself, you wouldn't be falling behind." Keith's voice wasn't loud, but it had that tone. The one meant to remind someone they were at the bottom of the ladder. Malcolm exhaled slowly, feeling something tighten in his chest. He had spent years making sure his restaurant was a place where people felt respected. A place where folks who had been overlooked, underestimated, or just plain struggling could work with dignity. And yet, here was Keith, running his kitchen like a drill sergeant, tearing into a waitress who was barely holding it together. Danielle wiped her face quickly, nodding, muttering an apology before hurrying out of the kitchen with a tray of food. Keith shook his head, grumbling to himself as he turned back toward the grill, like it was just another moment in another day. But Malcolm knew this wasn't just another moment. This wasn't about a slow waitress or a busy night. Something else was going on, and he was about to find out what. Malcolm wasn't the type to make scenes. He believed in handling things the right way, observing, understanding, then acting when the time was right. But there were moments when silence was just another way of saying this doesn't matter. And this mattered. He pushed his plate aside and got up, moving toward the kitchen with the same easy stride he always had. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But there was a weight in his steps, something solid and sure. As he stepped through the swinging doors, Keith barely spared him a glance, too busy barking orders at the line cooks. The smell of grease and spices thickened in the air, but the tension was thicker. Danielle was at the drink station, moving fast, head low. Her hands were still trembling as she grabbed a pitcher of iced tea. Malcolm walked over, slow and steady. "You all right?" he asked, keeping his voice low. She flinched, like she hadn't expected anyone to ask. "Yeah," she said quickly, not looking up. "I'm fine." Malcolm wasn't buying it. "You sure?" he pressed. Danielle swallowed, nodding, but her hands told the truth. The pitcher shook slightly as she poured, the ice clinking against the glass like tiny alarms. Before she could say anything else, Keith's voice cut through the moment. "Danielle, quit standing around. You got tables to take care of." She tensed, turning to go, but Malcolm wasn't done yet. "Hey, Keith," he said, voice casual. "Got a second?" Keith turned, finally looking at him. Really looking at him. Malcolm saw the flicker of irritation, like he was trying to place whether this was a customer he had to fake a smile for, or just some guy he could brush off. "Kitchen's busy, man. If you need something, ask a server." Malcolm tilted his head slightly, studying him. "I don't need anything. Just curious. What's got you so worked up tonight?" Keith scoffed. "Worked up? I'm just doing my job. We're short-staffed, and I got people dragging their feet." His eyes flicked toward Danielle. Malcolm caught that, and he didn't like it. "Short-staffed, huh? Sounds tough. You ever stop to ask why someone might be struggling?" Keith's jaw tightened. "Look, man, I don't have time for this. I run things how I see fit." Malcolm smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's so," he said, voice light. "Well, here's the thing. I run things too." Keith frowned, confused. "Excuse me." Malcolm exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. He could say it right then, drop the weight of his name and title and watch the color drain from Keith's face. But that wasn't how he operated. Not yet. But tomorrow? Tomorrow Keith was going to learn exactly who he had been talking to. Malcolm didn't say another word. He just turned and walked back to his booth, his expression unreadable. Keith stood there for a second, watching him go, but eventually shook his head and got back to work. To him, Malcolm was just some customer who thought he could meddle in things that weren't his business. Danielle didn't say anything either. She just went back to pouring drinks, moving like she was trying to make herself smaller. Malcolm sat back down, but his appetite was gone. He picked at his cornbread, deep in thought. This wasn't the first time he had heard complaints about Keith. Nothing major, just little things. A sharp tone here, an impatient remark there. Things people brushed off because, well, kitchens were stressful places. But what he saw tonight, that wasn't just stress. That was control. That was power being used the wrong way. And Malcolm had been in too many rooms where people like Keith got away with it. He glanced around the diner, watching how the night played out. Customers laughed and ate, oblivious to the tension that had settled in the back. Danielle moved from table to table, her face a mask of politeness, but her shoulders still carried the weight of whatever had broken her in that kitchen. And Keith? He was back to barking orders, like nothing had happened. Malcolm set his fork down, his decision made. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be just another customer in the corner booth. Tomorrow, he would be the boss. And tomorrow, Keith was going to learn the one rule Malcolm Reed had always lived by. You don't break the people who make your business run. The next evening, Malcolm walked into Reed's comfort kitchen the way he always did, through the front door, dressed in jeans and a hoodie. But this time, he wasn't here to observe. He was here to clean house. The dinner rush was just picking up. Servers darted between tables. The kitchen was alive with the sizzle of food on the grill, and the scent of fried chicken and fresh biscuits filled the air. Keith was at the pass, shouting at a cook about portion sizes when Malcolm stepped inside. He didn't notice him at first. Danielle was working again too, moving through the restaurant with that same forced politeness. She hadn't seen him yet either. Malcolm didn't waste time. He walked straight to the middle of the diner, found the one empty table in the center of the room, and climbed up onto the chair. Then he spoke. "Evening, everyone." The restaurant went still. Conversations died, forks hovered mid-air, and heads turned. Keith finally looked up from the kitchen, frowning. "What the—" Malcolm raised a hand, cutting him off before he could finish. "I see some new faces here tonight, so let me introduce myself. My name is Malcolm Reed. I own this place." A beat of silence. Then a ripple of realization moved through the staff. A few servers' mouths dropped open. One of the cooks muttered, "Oh, damn." Danielle froze in the middle of setting down a plate. Her eyes widened, flicking between Malcolm and Keith. And Keith. Keith's whole face changed. The color drained from his skin. His posture stiffened. He wasn't barking orders anymore. Malcolm stepped down from the chair, moving slowly toward the kitchen, toward Keith. "So, Keith," Malcolm said, voice steady. "You said yesterday that you run things how you see fit." Keith opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Malcolm nodded. "Good. That's exactly what I need to talk to you about." He stopped just short of the kitchen doors, hands in his pockets. "I built this place from nothing. Not just for customers, but for the people who work here. And I don't care how busy a shift gets. What I saw last night?" He shook his head. "That doesn't fly with me." Keith swallowed hard. He was scrambling, trying to salvage the moment. Look, Malcolm, I was just trying to keep things running. She was falling behind. I wasn't—" "Stop," Malcolm cut in, his voice still calm. "You weren't managing. You were breaking people down. And you thought no one was watching." He let that sink in. "But I was." Keith had no words. He stood there, shifting his weight, jaw tightening. He knew there was no talking his way out of this. Malcolm glanced toward Danielle. "Danielle," he said, "come here for a second." She hesitated but stepped forward. Malcolm looked her in the eye. "I need to ask you something. Do you feel like this is a place where you're respected?" She blinked. She glanced at Keith, then back at Malcolm. He gave her a small nod, reassuring. She took a breath. "No," she admitted quietly. "Not when he's here." Malcolm turned back to Keith. "That's all I needed to hear." Then he fired him, right there, in front of everyone. "Keith, I appreciate the years you put in, but your time here is done. You can grab your things and go." Keith's mouth dropped open. He took a step forward like he might argue, but Malcolm didn't flinch. The power had shifted. A few of the cooks exchanged looks. The servers stayed silent, watching. Keith exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake," he muttered. Malcolm didn't blink. "No, Keith. Keeping you would be the mistake." Silence. And then Keith did the only thing he could do. He left. Walked out the back door without another word. And just like that, the weight in the room lifted. Danielle let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. A few of the servers exchanged glances. Relief. Quiet smiles. Malcolm turned back to the staff. "Let me make something clear," he said. "This restaurant? It runs on respect. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to tear someone down in my kitchen. Not while I own it." He paused, scanning the faces in the room. "So if you ever feel like you're being treated unfairly, you come to me. Because this place—" He motioned around. "It only works if we take care of each other." And just like that, the message was loud and clear. But Malcolm knew something else too. Fixing one problem didn't mean the work was done. And that was the part that mattered the most. The night carried on, but the energy had shifted. For the first time in a long while, the kitchen didn't feel like a place people had to survive. The weight that had been sitting on everyone's shoulders, especially Danielle's, felt just a little lighter. As Malcolm stood by the kitchen doors, he caught a glimpse of her. She was still working, still moving table to table. But this time, something was different. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't shrinking herself. And when she turned to grab a drink from the counter, Malcolm saw it. A small but real smile. That was enough for now. As the night wound down, the last few customers trickled out, and Malcolm stayed behind, watching as the staff finished closing up. He knew he couldn't fix everything in one night, but he could set the tone. He walked back to the kitchen, leaning against the doorway as the last of the plates were stacked and the grills were wiped clean. "All right, listen up," he said, getting everyone's attention. They turned, waiting. "I know things have been rough. Some of you might have thought speaking up wouldn't change anything. But let me make one thing clear. I see you. I see how hard you work, and I see what this place means to you. And if someone's making your job harder instead of better, they don't belong here." He let that settle. "This ain't just a business to me, it's a second home, and you don't let people poison your home." A few heads nodded. One of the cooks, an older guy named Reggie, cracked a small grin. "Took you long enough, boss." A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room. Even Danielle cracked a smile. Malcolm smirked. Yeah, I know." He clapped his hands together. "Now get out of here. You all earned a good night's sleep." As the staff started to filter out, Danielle lingered near the register, folding a few receipts. Malcolm caught the hesitation in her stance. "Something on your mind?" he asked. She hesitated before looking up at him. "I just wanted to say thank you." Malcolm studied her for a second, then gave a small nod. "You don't owe me a thank you. You deserved better. Simple as that." She nodded, pressing her lips together. "Still, thank you." And with that, she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Malcolm exhaled, rubbing a hand over his beard as the last of the lights were dimmed. The diner was quiet now. Just him, the hum of the fridge, and the lingering scent of fried food in the air. Owning a business wasn't just about making money. It was about the people. And tonight, he had made it clear. This place wasn't just his. It belonged to the people who kept it running. And as long as he was in charge, no one was going to take that away from them. If you've ever been in a workplace where you felt unheard, this story is for you. Nobody should feel afraid to stand up for themselves. Respect isn't a privilege, it's a right. And if you're in a position of power, ask yourself, are you building people up, or are you breaking them down? Because real leadership isn't about control, it's about making sure the people around you feel valued. And that changes everything. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and let me know your thoughts. Have you ever had a boss like Keith? Or have you had one like Malcolm? Share your experience below, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe. More real, powerful stories are coming your way. You don't want to miss them.